Kathleen is my name. I am a dedicated professional woman of 31 years of age. Patrick and I share a home where we both reside. I've been considering starting a family a lot lately. Patrick, though, thinks otherwise. He believes that before starting a family, we should accumulate enough money to buy a home and settle down. As a result, we are both putting a lot of effort into saving for our future house. Patrick is adamant about his choice, despite my desire to have kids soon. Every time I mention the possibility of having children, he emphasizes how crucial it is to first purchase a home. The fact that he doesn't seem to get how I feel is distressing. I've made the decision to put in even more effort to help us save money so that we can get to our objective sooner. After a year of marriage, I've observed a certain something about Patrick and me. My opinions are rarely taken seriously by him. Even when we were dating, this was accurate. I used to admire his strong will, but now I understand that marriage is about both partners accepting one another's opinions. My concerns about our connection are growing. His parents' intense involvement in our lives makes things feel even more difficult. Patrick frequently visits his parents, who reside close. These visits help us save money, he explains. He occasionally goes out for drinks with his coworkers, though, and I learned that he doesn't account for such expenses in his savings plan. It seems unjust that he is more lenient about his own expenditures, yet quite rigid about saving for me. He even advises me to fast turn off lights and use less hot water, yet he doesn't do either of these things himself. Perhaps our relationship wouldn't feel so out of balance if he treated us equally. Every week we visit Patrick's parents, and it feels like there's always a new issue. They often ask, "When are you planning to have a baby?" "It's been a year since you got married," they say. "When will we get to see our grandchild?" Their constant comments put a lot of pressure on me. Meanwhile, Patrick just sits beside me quietly and doesn't say much to support me. This situation is very frustrating. I feel like I'm carrying the weight of these expectations by myself. Patrick's focus on saving and his parents' pressure to start a family make me feel stuck. Marriage should be about partnership, where both people listen to and support each other. I hope that Patrick and I can learn to work together better, not just on saving money, but also on making decisions that matter to both of us. I want our marriage to feel like a true partnership, where we both feel heard and valued. I can see it in Patrick's face. He's glaring at me disapprovingly. It's clear he wants to tell me, "Don't say unnecessary things." Like him, I want a child too, but he insists that we must first build our own house. What frustrates me even more is how his parents keep pressuring me about having a child. Instead of advising Patrick, who refuses to listen to me when I bring up the topic, they turn all their focus on me. During every visit to their home, I feel overwhelmed by their constant remarks. Even though I want to speak up, I'm silenced by their relentless pressure to have a grandchild. It's inappropriate for them to keep badgering me about this, especially when Patrick is the one unwilling to take the next step. After the meal that evening, Patrick casually announced, "I'm going out for a smoke." That's when one of my in-laws said something that stung deeply. "Kathleen, it seems like you're always working. If you want to be a proper housewife, you should quit your job and focus on being a good wife. Maybe that's why Patrick isn't paying attention to you." Their words felt like a slap. It sounded as though they were blaming me for not having children simply because I have a career. I couldn't hold back any longer. "It's Patrick who asked me to work in the first place," I retorted. "If you're so concerned about this, why don't you talk to your son first instead of lecturing me all the time?" My voice rose with anger. I want children too, but Patrick refuses to even consider it until we have a house. If you want someone to convince, start with him. Stop putting all the blame on me. My words left them stunned. There was silence around the table as I stood up, muttered an apology, and walked out. By the time I reached the entrance, my anger had shifted toward Patrick. There he was casually smoking by the door as though nothing had happened. I climbed into the car without saying much, but Patrick followed me and asked, "Hey, are we leaving already?" He sounded completely unbothered by what had just happened. Knowing he would never be honest with his parents about the situation, I felt fed up with all the stress they were piling on me. As the car started, I told Patrick firmly, "I'm not visiting your parents' house anymore." He looked shocked and asked, "Why not? We save on food expenses by eating there. Plus, you want a house and kids too, don't you?" That was it for me. I couldn't take the constant demands anymore, from his parents or from him. Both of them seemed more interested in blaming me than working together to solve the real problems. It was clear things needed to change, and I wasn't going to keep quiet any longer. I snapped and said, "If saving money is so important, why don't you cut back on things like your drinking parties or smoking, instead of driving all the way to your parents' house just to save on one meal? Why not focus on saving money in ways that actually make a difference?" My frustration boiled over as I continued. "Everyone needs a break sometimes, but you keep putting all these rules on me, like not using hot water or making sure the lights are off by 9 p.m. Do you think we can save money without you sacrificing anything? If I have to do all of this alone, then I don't even want the house. I'm tired of this." Patrick brushed it off, saying, "It's not a big deal." But I shot back, "No, it is a big deal. How much patience do you think I have? I've put up with this for so long." I was also angry about how he acted in front of his parents, pretending that I was the reason we weren't having children. "I'm tired of always being blamed for not giving them grandchildren," I said. "It's not me who doesn't want kids. It's you. I've been saying for ages that I want children soon, so stop being so stubborn." Seeing Patrick struggle to handle my unusual burst of anger gave me a small sense of relief, but it didn't fix everything. I turned away and stared out of the car window, ignoring him. I felt exhausted and unsure of what to do next. 2 months later, something happened that shifted things between us. My father's brother, my uncle, passed away. He had been wealthy, owning several pieces of land, a grand mansion, and living a luxurious lifestyle. Patrick appeared to notice his passing. He exclaimed, visibly taken aback, "Wow, I didn't know you had such an impressive relative." I learned of my uncle's fortune a few days after he passed away. I made the decision to meet with the lawyer in our flat to go over the specifics. I knew Patrick wasn't involved because the inheritance was only tied to me. I gently asked Patrick to leave the room when the attorney showed up. Even if it was a personal issue that didn't involve him, he appeared uneasy about the subject of inheritance. I had to consider our relationship during the entire time. Patrick's behavior, from his frugality to his unwillingness to compromise, had worn me down. Yet here he was, suddenly intrigued by my uncle's wealth, even though he had been so dismissive about everything else. It was frustrating and disappointing. The inheritance meeting felt like a moment where I could focus on something for myself without his interference or criticism. It made me realize I needed to stand up for myself more often and not let Patrick's controlling ways dominate every aspect of my life. I wanted to keep Patrick out of any trouble that might come up if he got involved in the inheritance discussion. After about 6 hours of listening to the lawyer explain all the details, I thanked him for his time and said goodbye. When I finished, I noticed Patrick, who had been at home earlier, was nowhere to be found. I figured he had stepped out to avoid interrupting the meeting, so I started preparing dinner, not thinking much of it. 5 months later, Patrick came up to me and said, "There's something I want to show you." Without giving much explanation, he took me for a drive. I felt a mix of excitement and curiosity as we entered a residential area, but my confusion grew when we parked in front of a house. I didn't recognize it. Patrick pressed the doorbell, and to my surprise, his parents came out to greet us. This isn't their house, I thought, feeling uneasy. My father-in-law welcomed us, saying, "You finally made it. When are you moving in, Kathleen?" You should get ready to live here with us by the end of the month." His words caught me completely off guard. He then went on to accuse me of being a selfish daughter-in-law and said I was always blaming Patrick for the delay in having children. I shot a sharp look at Patrick, stunned and upset. Why would he bring me here after I had made it clear I didn't want to visit his parents anymore? Trying to make sense of what was happening, I asked Patrick why he had done this. He shrugged casually and said, "Don't get so angry. If we live together, it will help you and my mom get closer. Besides, this will be our new home, so you should try to work with them on the children issue too." Live together, I repeated, feeling disbelief. I had never agreed to live with his parents, especially after all the stress and pressure they had put on me. I reminded him that I had specifically said I wouldn't visit their house anymore. Patrick then explained, "It's a one-family house. My plan was always for us to live with my parents eventually, so what's the problem with living in a one-family house now?" His words left me speechless. The idea of living with his parents after everything I had endured was not something I could accept. To make matters worse, Patrick had made this decision without even talking to me about it first. The air felt heavy as his question hung there unanswered. This moment made it clear to me that Patrick and I weren't on the same page about what we wanted for our future. The frustration and betrayal I felt were overwhelming, and I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. I thought a lot about the situation. Living in a one-family house was a big decision, especially when considering our financial state. From what I knew, building such a beautiful new house didn't seem possible with our savings. I couldn't understand how Patrick had managed it. "My dad and I chipped in money," Patrick explained casually. "Our savings are empty now, but it's fine, right?" His laid-back attitude left me confused. Then he added, "I heard your uncle's inheritance is worth $920,000, so if you'd use that money to pay us back for the cost of the house, it should work out." I was shocked. He really thought my inheritance should automatically go toward the house without even asking me first. Even if I did receive the inheritance, how to use it should be my decision, not his. The fact that he assumed otherwise upset me deeply. When I rejected the idea, Patrick became visibly frustrated. He reached into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name already on it. "Your inheritance is our money. If you don't want to live with my parents, then let's just get a divorce," he said coldly. I took the divorce form from his hand, feeling a strange sense of relief. "Fine, I'll sign it," I replied firmly. "If living together with your parents is the only other option, then divorce is the better choice." I placed the form into my bag, turned my back to him and his stunned parents, and continued, "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." Patrick froze, his face full of confusion. I didn't wait for him to respond. I left, took a bus back to our apartment, and decided to take control of my life. Once home, I completed the divorce form by signing my name next to Patrick's. I didn't hesitate. Submitted the papers right away, knowing I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I went to a home improvement store and bought some cardboard boxes to start packing. Realizing I couldn't handle the move alone, I hired a moving company. Luckily, it was a slow season for moving, so they could help me relocate quickly. As I packed, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and determination. It wasn't an easy decision to end my marriage, but I knew it was the right one. Living in a situation where my voice was ignored and my boundaries were crossed wasn't something I could accept anymore. By taking these steps, I was finally prioritizing my own happiness and peace of mind. It wasn't just about moving out of the apartment. It was about moving forward in life on my terms. Though the road ahead seemed uncertain, I felt ready to face it with strength and confidence. As I packed my belongings for the move, I heard a commotion outside the front door. It was Patrick, trying to come in. I had the chain lock on and called out to him, "Sorry, the chain lock is on. I don't know what you might do when you're angry." Besides, I need to finish packing. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" Patrick's voice was firm as he responded, "I won't accept a divorce." His statement caught me off guard. I paused and said, "But you handed me the divorce form yourself, didn't you? If you signed it, that means you agreed to the divorce. Do you understand what you've done?" He looked frustrated but didn't say much, his frown deepening. Then he quickly changed the topic. "Why would you give up on a $920,000 inheritance? Normally you'd inherit it." He questioned. It seemed he had overheard bits of the story about the inheritance, but didn't know the full details. Likely after hearing about the amount, he rushed to my in-laws and they impulsively decided to buy the one-family house, assuming it would cover it. They hadn't stopped to think about the consequences. I took a deep breath and explained, "The inheritance came to me because there wasn't anyone else to claim it. My uncle had 2 sons, 4 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren. However, all of them renounced the inheritance, so it ended up coming to me. Yes, my uncle had $920,000, but he also had to demolish his mansion, spend a lot on maintaining his land, and pay off significant debts. After understanding everything, I realized it was better to renounce the inheritance than to take it and deal with all the problems that came with it." Patrick stared at me in disbelief. "No way, so even if you had inherited $920,000, you're saying there wouldn't have been much left? That's fraud." I shook my head. "It's not fraud. The lawyer and I discussed everything properly. The truth is someone overheard part of the discussion, but didn't stay long enough to hear the whole story. They misunderstood and spread false information. That's how all this confusion started." My explanation left Patrick speechless. For the first time, he seemed to realize the mistake he had made. He had jumped to conclusions, made plans without consulting me, and had involved his parents in decisions based on incomplete information. As I continued packing, I could sense that Patrick was finally reflecting on his actions. Whether or not he fully understood the consequences, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let myself be dragged into a life where my voice and choices didn't matter. For me, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would take control of my own life, free from the pressures of Patrick and his family. "It's too late now," I said firmly. "You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for divorce, and we are no longer a couple. Why are you suddenly saying you don't want a divorce now? If you truly didn't want this, you should have followed me right away when I returned, shouldn't you?" I reminded him that his actions had consequences and no amount of regret could change what had already happened. I added, "Your mother's opinion about the divorce doesn't change the fact that you and your father invested in the one-family house without considering my feelings or even discussing it with me. Your mother doesn't understand the value of money because she hasn't worked or handled finances the way I have. But that's not my problem anymore." I was realizing that I wasn't responsible for listening to his complaints about his family anymore. If we were still married, maybe I would have cared, but we're not a couple now. Besides, have you even submitted the divorce papers yet? Patrick looked desperate and pleaded, "If you don't file them, we can still fix this. Please, let's live together in the one-family house. We can make it work." I shook my head. "I've already submitted the divorce papers. There's no going back now." His face fell, and he stood outside the apartment door, looking lost and defeated. While I believed he brought this on himself, I didn't want to leave him lingering outside forever. Still, I had no time to waste, so I focused on my preparations for the move. After a while, he left, and I continued with my plans. Since my supervisor had previously served as a mediator between Patrick and myself, I later told my employer about the divorce. I felt compelled to apologize for the outcome. I also discussed the problem with my coworkers over lunch, many of whom had been at our wedding. Patrick shocked me that day by storming into my department in front of everyone. "It's ridiculous that you're discussing the divorce in such an open manner," he cried. I wish you hadn't brought it up. Word got around in his department, he added, and people refused to use the estate for the house because they thought I had inherited it. He said that because of our divorce, he was unfairly condemned and shunned by his coworkers. My coworkers sympathized with me because of how awkward the situation was. Patrick eventually resigned his job because it became intolerable to him over time. During this challenging time, an unforeseen event occurred. One of my male coworkers came up to me and admitted, "I've really admired you for a while. I respect your strength, and I would adore creating a life with you, a place where we can talk and resolve conflicts as real partners." His remarks had a profound effect on me. I felt optimistic about what the future might bring for the first time in a long time. I came to see that moving on meant more than simply letting go of the past. It meant building a better, happier life for myself, one in which I could be respected and appreciated.